It's great to see so many new and familiar faces, and so thank you for joining us, and please continue to come to events in the future. We are very, very thankful for the support that we receive for the Business Indicator Series. The Letty Group supports our programs here on the Seacoast, and then Bellwether Community Credit Union supports us in the Manchester programs. So right before I introduce our speakers, I just wanted to give you a few quick updates. This year we held 4 commencement ceremonies, and over 2 days we added over 2,000 members to our alumni population. So our alumni association is now over 70,000 alumni strong, which is amazing. And we'll continue to grow at that pace over the next several years. So that's a great network to tap into. This year has brought a lot of increased alumni engagement, and one of the ways is through new programs. One of those new programs was our Global Days of Service, which we ran over the month of April, and that we were happy to report that we had 53 sites, 469 volunteers, and over 2,134 hours of service served throughout the entire country. So that was an amazing effort, collaboration amongst everyone, and that brought together alumni, students, adjunct faculty, family, and friends of the university. So that was awesome. And we're looking forward to planning for April 2017. And then we also have several major construction projects underway on campus, one of which is the Gustafson Center, which will open hopefully at the beginning of 2017. That will serve the life cycle of the student, so that will house our admission staff, our career staff for UC undergraduate student population, and our alumni office, which will be awesome for everyone to be able to come, and it's a really nice welcoming space for us. And then I'm going to introduce Pam Boutsellis and Joshua Dodson to talk to us a little bit today about authentic storytelling, a content marketing strategy with the brand in mind. And they are 2 community members who we are really excited to have with us today, and I will let them introduce a little bit and take it from here. So thank you guys, and thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
And new graduate. And a new alumna as well.
I will have you know, 30 years after starting, I finished.
Yay.
Now I'm in the master's program.
Well,
Thanks for having me.
Thank you all so much. We're thrilled to be here. First of all, can you hear me okay in the back? I know I'm a little quiet, so I want to make sure I'm loud enough for everyone. Thank you so much. We would love to tell you a little bit about ourselves, some of what we're doing at SNU, some of what we're excited about around content and authentic storytelling. That's something that really excites us. We've seen a lot of really amazing results. I'm Joshua Dodson, by the way, and I'm thrilled to be here with Pam to talk a little bit about it. We're going to, first of all, talk about some considerations when we're talking about storytelling, brand storytelling, making it authentic, and something that would be effective for maybe the business that you're working with or you're trying to contribute in some way. The approach that we've taken and then some examples. But I'm going to let Pam jump in right away and talk about why stories matter.
So, since the beginning of time, stories have been just an integral part of just the way our cultures have evolved. We look to stories to learn, we look to stories to find out new information, to find out about the people before us, and that still translates today. When people come to the snhu.edu website, they not only want to find out about what we offer as a university, they want to find out about the people that have been there before them. And that's a big part of our approach to content marketing and why our stories we're telling matter. And hopefully you'll be able to translate that into your own needs and be able to tell stories that matter to your customer base too.
One of the things that we start looking at right away when we're talking about stories is the brand fit. I mean, in this really good example here, you think of Toshiba and you think of Apple. They're very different products, they're very different experiences. You could kind of get to the same end goal with either a Toshiba or an Apple in a lot of ways, but they're very different, and you wouldn't expect to see the Apple logo, for example, on a Toshiba laptop. So when we think about the brand fit of stories as well and what really defines the type of story that fits with a brand is an important consideration as well, similar to a logo or what you might look for in that sort of branding piece. As well as market demand. You know, what are people really interested in, and what really resonates well for the market? And that's one of the things that Pam's done a great job with in finding out how to take that really interesting piece and match it with some of the pieces that really are in demand for the market.
One of the things that we do a lot actually in working with Christy and team is, as I said, people want to know about who's gone to SNHU and what have they done as a result of that. Why did it matter? Did they have a good experience? What sort of career did they get in the aftermath? So what we love to do is, we know people are interested in things like, what are the top jobs maybe you can get with a business degree? Well, we can talk about that, and we can use a lot of statistics and facts and figures, but what they want to know is the human element, and that's what we introduce, and what actually everyone that works in your team is fabulous in sharing the stories of many people like yourselves, and we'd love to feature you too. But to be able to share what outcomes are, why it mattered, what you got to do with your degree, what surprises were along the way.
So, spend a few minutes talking with some of the data that we use to inform the approach that we take, and then we'll jump right back into some additional elements about the stories themselves. But the first thing to think about is that people are asking a lot of questions. With the rise of mobile, I'm sure we all have a mobile phone, and voice search, that's very prominent now. So if you think about the way that we interact with search, Google search, you know, we're getting back to the point where we're asking questions. You know, get our voice search out there and ask a question. How do I get to this place? Or what is the new movie that's at the movie theater? Any number of questions that we might ask. So starting with some of the questions, the audience asks a lot of questions. For us, it's related to degrees. Why get a degree in business, economics, communications, whatever it may be? Why get a degree in this topic? And so we start by thinking about those questions that people are asking. And then we want to take it and actually get some data around it, how many people are actually looking for these things. And so we use a couple tools. Google Keyword Planner is a really great tool. If I could give one piece of advice when you're thinking about using data for identifying story topics, it would be to use Google Keyword Planner. And you can start to look for some of the questions that people are actually asking. For example, what is a bachelor degree? 6,600 people search for that exact question every month. You can look at this.
And we answer it.
And we answer it. That's exactly right. We really try to offer some answers to these questions. What is a bachelor's degree? And look at the variations in the ways that people are asking for these questions. So when we can see the number of people asking for questions that happen to be related to what we're offering, which happens to be a high-quality education that can fit that need, we want to make sure that we're right in front of them when they're asking it. And using tools like Google Keyword Planner and Uber Suggest makes it really easy to find those exact phrases that people are looking for. When we're thinking about the types of words that we include in the stories, we think about a few different pieces. So I won't spend too much time on this, other than to share that when we're thinking about a search like shoes, right? Shoes describes a lot of different things around shoes. Men's shoes starts to narrow it down a little bit. Red Nike men's running shoes gets very specific. So the more specific we can get, it's called the long tail of keywords, right? So I won't spend a lot of time on this, but it's very specific. We know exactly what people are looking for. It's like 3 or more words, and we know that that's a specific topic that we can start to address. Because if you write an article about red Nike men's running shoes, and people search for red Nike men's running shoes, it's much easier to align the article you wrote with what people are looking for, rather than if you just wrote an article about shoes in general. You might not show up. It might be harder to find what you're looking for. So that's one of the pieces that we really look for when we're pulling the data together about the types of topics we want to address. And one thing to keep in mind, too, is that when you look at the top 10 search results for Google searches, all of them, on average, at least most of them, are well over 2,000 words in length. That goes against what a lot of us would expect. We tend to think about short posts, 500 to 800 words long as being the ideal length. But in fact, a lot of people are wanting that more in-depth view that Pam will talk about in a minute as well. So consider that you can address the short pieces, but also do the deep dives. Think about how to fully address this topic that people are really interested in. And we'll show some examples of how we've treated that later on. There's a website, Quartz, and the editor for Quartz found with a lot of research that the chances of social media success is much higher on long analysis pieces and short, snappy pieces, but with a 500 to 800 word length posts, it doesn't perform very well. So, again, the typical length of an article that we might expect, that we might want to write for our website to promote our brand, is something that tends to not perform well on social media. And in fact, this is an example that the editor of Quartz, again, uses. That he tells his writers, don't write anything between 500 and 800 words. I'm not telling you not to write anything, because we still do, because there is a place for that as well. But making sure that you're addressing the other ends of the spectrum is something that's also really important. One example that we've done, so last September, we launched a content initiative to start promoting, we call it to tell the SNU story in an optimized way. We're really trying to share the successes of our alums that we're so proud of, and the really interesting things that our faculty are doing, and some key differentiators about our programs. So we started telling these stories, and over time, we could see right there, like right in that spot right there, that's about September. And the orange line is SNHU, and all the other lines are our top competitors. So you can see when we start telling our story, we start producing regular, fresh content around what people are looking for, we start to sort of break apart from what our competitors are doing, how well they're performing. This is specific to organic search, that's the non-paid stuff. If you go to Google, you type something in, we're not paying for the ads, we want to show up naturally. So we really started to see that we're ahead of our competitor, and doing further analysis, we actually saw that the articles themselves to tell this news story was a 67% lift in organic search. That's the only difference we made, or the key difference that we made, apart from our competitors. They're not doing it. They're not really telling their story. We're putting a lot behind it and making sure that we're actually getting those results that we want to. And we're keeping in mind some of the key pieces such as tone, which I'll let Pam jump back in.
I'm not sure if we're talking more about the length, but just I would bring up when Josh and I first started talking about the articles, and I thought, well, best practices is always telling you about 500 words. And I've had a solid background in journalism too, where everything gets shorter, right, by the day. And so I thought I knew a thing or two. And he said, yeah, well, a big part of this, the foundation, is going to be 2,500 word articles, which I happen to love writing, but I thought he was out of his mind. I really did. I'm like, this is not going to work. But it did, in fact, work. And you can see these are the various lengths that we work on, because there's different stories to tell, right? I mean, if you want to look at something very quickly and you want that 500 words, it might be a Q&A that you're going to do, 800 words. It might be a brief profile. But if you really want to dig deep into subject matter and you really want to profile 3 or 4 students or faculty or maybe 7 concentrations in a program, that 2,500 words is highly readable. It allows you to put a lot of keywords in, and you've seen the success as a result. So I'm here to, I'll testify. He's not crazy.
And so some of the things that when we're talking about these 2,500 word pieces, it's really important that we're still doing it in an authentic way that's true to our brand, right? That's the driving force. Mm-hmm. Everything that you've grown to love about SNHU, we want to be true to that. We want you to be able to read these articles and be proud of the stories that you're reading as well. We don't want it to sound cheesy or anything like that. We want it to be really high quality. So we're also considering the way that we're writing it, the type of words we're using to describe the scenarios, the casual way that we're talking about it, but in an authoritative way that's also on brand.
We want to show authority but never be academic. The thing that's, and I think any of you who are working in an organization that you really feel strongly about, and if you're responsible for telling the brand story, you have tremendous pride, I hope, in that brand. And you know the way that you speak to your customer base, you know how you speak in terms of your own culture. That is so important to us at SNHU. And I don't care how many outside agencies who come in, no one knows our brand better than we do. We are very true to how we started many years ago. We've only grown even more so in believing in it. And so that's very important to us. When we're telling a story, we want to make sure we're not only showing authority, but we're being friendly. We want you to feel like we're somebody that's very accessible to speak with. We want to be very authentic and honest. And we want to make it so that you feel like this is a place perhaps I can feel comfortable. These are people that I can relate to. So that is very important. We have some in-house writers, but we do use freelancers. And that's one of the things that, besides grammatically correct and the important information being accurate, we want to make sure it sounds like us. Because at the end of the day, we're not trying to tell you a story that isn't really our story.
The way that we try to approach the articles as well to make sure that we're getting the most out of it, it's really important for us to consider how frequently we're posting these things. So we started the initiative back in September, and we started by publishing 3 articles a week. One of the 2,500 word posts, the ridiculously long posts that Pam pointed out, and then 2 of the shorter ones, the things that we would typically expect. That's the way we started as a pilot. And over time we saw the success was building on itself. And we actually have moved to the point where we're publishing an article a day, sometimes 2, but mostly 1 article a day. Every day you go to snhu.edu, scroll down, and you see new at SNU. That's where we're posting these. So we're publishing them very frequently. Now it's typically 2 long-form posts a week, and then the rest of them are going to be within the typical range, some videos mixed in, some photo blogs mixed in. We'll show an example of that later on. But the key piece that I would recommend considering if you start to implement this wherever you're working for your business or someone that you're working with, consistency is the key. You need to set the expectation that I'm going to publish every week at this time, or I'm going to publish every other week at this time. If you don't have the resources or the time or energy to do an article a day, many of us don't, that's fine. Just make sure that it's consistent. That's the key to the long-term success, is the consistency.
Yeah, set yourself up for success.
Exactly. So we want to make sure that we're really looking for that, setting that precedent. So that's the overall approach that we decided to take, and it's worked out really well for us. And we'll go over some examples of how we've approached this. And one really great example, I love this example, I point to it a lot. Why is education important? 4,400 people on an average month search for that exact phrase. So there's quite a bit of search. Think about all of the variations of that phrase. Why education is important, right? That's a totally different search. It's similar, but it's different. Or why education is important to me, or why is education important for life, or any number of variations of that. The number of people that search for that every month grows and grows. There's a lot of people. So we took that search phrase, and we wrote an article, and did our first one. Actually, we turned it into a series where we asked our President Paul Blank, exactly his response to why education is important. And we published that, you can see, September 28, 2015, and now we're position number 3 in searches. So when you think about 4,400 people searching for that exact phrase every single month, and our president is number 3, that's pretty good. A lot of people are seeing that. So we wrote this piece and really showcased his view around why education is important. We've seen a lot of really good success from that. One other piece I would point out is top business degrees. 210 people search for that every month, but look at all these other variations. Business degree, 12,100 people. Business management degree, 8,100 people. Every single month are looking for this. So we look for this top business degrees keyword, and we think about how are we going to start incorporating this into an article in a way that makes sense, it's authentic, it's true to our brand. And so you can see a couple of the highlighted examples of the actual keyword. We're putting it in the title, we're including it in the text, making sure that it shows up a few times. Not too many times. We don't want to stuff it in there unnaturally, but we want it to appear frequently enough to where the search engines can see it and recognize that this article is related to this topic. But the reader reads it and says, yeah, this still makes a lot of sense. It's authentic, it's natural. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about how you approach that.
Well, what's interesting too, depending on the length, and I have a feeling this is a 2,500 word article, if you're talking about top business degrees, it gives you opportunity to say maybe between 300 and 500 words on some of the top ones, or you just name a few of them. We link out to our different parts of the website, but we tell the stories. Who's had some of those top degrees? What are they doing? Why did they go into that? Because as important as it is to tell the story of people who have completed their degree, it's also important to say why somebody's currently in there, and say the circumstance. It may be somebody that's got 4 kids, they're working 2 jobs, they have an elderly parent, but yet they still have the time to go to school, and what that means to them. And you start to see yourself saying, well, they can do it, I could probably do that too.
This is a really great example. This one was published just a few days ago. We took if you're familiar with StoryCorps, NPR, where they go and ask stories and have people tell their story about why they do certain things, we kind of took an approach where we sat down with some people who are just graduating, just recently, and asked them, to tell us their story about graduation. So on video, and we have little video clips, and it's really great that we're able to showcase in their own words what type of impact it's had on their life. But then we write a narrative around it too, to make sure that we're fully elaborating on the importance of that to that person. And then jump in.
This is actually, again, we're always finding hidden gems. This woman is an actress on Orange is the New Black, and she just finished her master's in screenwriting. And because she knows she's an older actress, she's trying to move on to other things in her life. She wants to write and direct. And we often hear, I was saying this earlier, a lot of the stories we hear are kind of, oh, by the way, I have a student, this is, and you're like, wait a minute, tell me this story. And it's intriguing because our students are everywhere and they have amazing stories. And it's from somebody who makes a very good living as an actress who could probably go almost anywhere. She found the support she got at SNHU to be the reason why she wanted to complete her degree. And what she started hearing within the industry. We had spoken earlier, telling a few people that we have a story that we're doing right now about a man from Gambia that actually, well, his parents were from Gambia, came here, was raised, served in the U.S. Navy, went back to Gambia, got a high-level government position, saw the government was corrupt, was thrown into jail by the president for 20 years. With hard labor. He was in solitary confinement for 6 years, and Jesse Jackson negotiated and got him out. He's just finishing his master's now in criminal justice. I mean, our students are amazing and fascinating. And equally as fascinating is that mother with 4 children who's sacrificing so much. So it's, for us, it's a huge honor to be able to tell these stories.
This is an example of a different type of format. Clearly there's some text, there's the story around what happened, but there's also a really important part is the photos that went with it, so that we can actually show some of that examples. We don't want to just have text there, right? Because over time, that gets to be a little bit boring if that's all you see. But including some photos to actually bring the stories to life, that's something that we really try to emphasize and kind of bring the stories to life in additional ways. This happens to be the Career Houston hiring fair that happened a couple months ago. So you can see some really nice pictures of it as well as the story itself.
This is a young woman that had simply been searching for an online business administration degree and ended up coming to SNHU. She had her associates, she wanted to finish up, and we ended up telling her story because she ended up doing far more than she ever expected. And SNU Career again had stepped in and helped her, and what was most amazing was there's so many services that are available helping people, whether it's interviewing, doing mock interviews, doing cover letters, helping them with all their different searches and keywording up their resumes and such. And for this woman, she was so happy someone offered her a job, and her career advisor said, well, wait, what do they want to pay you? You need to buy a car. You're going to have student loans to pay. And worked with her and taught her how to negotiate, something she didn't even know was possible, negotiated a much higher salary, and she just wanted to tell us her story. She was delighted. And again, the face of somebody that's just another great student story.
This is another one of our examples where we're talking about, we do a lot of Q&As, a lot of instances where we'll ask someone a question or a few questions and try to get a response from them. So we get a lot of really great natural responses from this. I mean, we're not forcing anything here. We're just simply asking questions and trying to get their response. But the thing to keep in mind is that we're still keeping true to the market demand, the research that went into the topic, areas around things like data analytics skills. Right? So a lot of people are searching for that. We'll include it in the title. We'll make sure that maybe our introduction paragraph talks on that a little bit. And then the topic of data analytics starts to show up naturally throughout the text because we're asking questions about what they did and the experiences that they've had. So just because we're talking about the types of stories doesn't mean that we're sacrificing the data and the research that went into gathering keyword information and things like that as well.
Yeah, and especially she's very much an interest. She's a pharmaceutical lawyer. You wouldn't think she'd be interested in data analytics, but she found that would really help her in her role. This, again, is actually one of our employees. We also like to tell the story of staff members. Military veteran, she's also a military spouse that speaks very highly to our military population and what we do for military spouses as well. And what's really unique about SNHU is if you're an online military student, and I'm sure campus as well, you're not having advisors or career folks that have no experience in the military. They're people who have gone through what you've gone through as a veteran or an active duty service member. So it's very unique, and they can address whatever you're going through. And we really like to be able to tell those stories.
This is a really great example of actually this article and this approach. We started doing a series kind of similar to this, arose out of some challenges that we were finding around a particular set of keywords. Really important keywords to us. We want to be visible. We have a whole lot of MBA programs. They're really important to who we are as an institution to be able to tell the stories of MBA. But a lot of times when people were looking for MBA programs, we weren't at the top of the list. So we wanted to actually address that by really showcasing MBA programs. And so we decided to turn that challenge into an opportunity where we developed a series around people who have either just gotten their MBA or in the process of getting their MBA degree. And so Pam's done a great job of turning that into a really great example series.
Yeah, I mean, this is actually a much longer story than usual. We also have a Q&A we do with 3 questions, and you have been invaluable in providing us with MBA graduates. That's another thing that we haven't really spoken about, but one of the wonderful things is, sure, we're trying to bring attention to our website, trying to grow our presence through SEO. What this has also done, and it will do for your organization too, is bring people closer together. We meet monthly, every single part of the university that has any sort of a content interest as a publication such as you do. And we talk about students, we talk about ideas and projects. And it gives us an opportunity to learn more about each other. You often provide content that goes into this section, as do other teams. And it really gives us a fuller sense of all the amazing things going on. And it allows your staff to feel a lot of pride in not only what your organization is doing, but what their coworkers are doing. And it gives you a reason as colleagues to point out the good things too, to really focus on a lot of positive things. So it's all love, right?
Well, and sometimes we'll take a story that we're all interested in, we'll figure out maybe there's a long story here, but we could run it as a short segment in another format to appeal to a different part of the audience. And so how do we leverage some of the work that's being done in multiple places so that you don't feel like you're always having to be the one that creates? And so, we just shared the magazine that's on the table is our newest issue of Impact Magazine, and so we shared it at this meeting this morning, and Pam wrote back and said, we'd like to use this, figure out how we can share that out.
If I didn't say please.
Oh, absolutely. I just always infer that. But, so trying to figure out how do we might have been writing that primarily for our, the alumni community. There's a really great benefit of sharing that out. So you might think about that. Your intention might be in one place, but what are some ways for you to share that out or have partners of yours share some of that out in other spaces that give greater visibility? You guys are masters.
Well, it's a great thing, too, if you happen to be the subject of a story. That's something you can share on LinkedIn. That's something, too, if you're writing the stories and for your organization, it's more content that you can use social media channels, especially LinkedIn. It's a source of pride for people to be able to share. We actually have the folks that have answered the why is education important. There's a little competition who's getting the most views. Paul was number one, but somebody else has creeped up.
Unexpected little accidents that we find sometimes with these stories that are really phenomenal.
Oh, they're fun. Yes, they're fun.
So I hope that you have been able to get some takeaways from this and overall considerations, using the research, using a lot of the data. We start with data, we jump from there, we assess the impact that it's had overall. Some of the pieces that have worked well for us, we do believe that it would work well for other organizations. I think a lot of the principles are very applicable to other areas, but feel free to adjust it to your own organization too to make sure that it works well for what you're doing. It may be a little different. So, and then some of the examples that we went over, I hope that you found some valuable insight in this. And thank you so much for listening to us tonight, and we're happy to answer any questions or anything like that you all may have.
If you haven't guessed, we really love what we do.
I got a question. My question is that if you're generating stories after stories, and you want to be timely and relevant and have credibility, how do you identify a problem? You have the keyword search, but so that means if I'm using a keyword search personally, I have a problem. But if I'm creating content, I want to address a problem. So you can't just go fishing. You have to be aware of it. So how do you pinpoint a problem and verify that it truly is a credible problem and you have the answer? What are the steps involved?
I think Pam will be able to talk to this even better than I can, but my immediate response is always be talking to your customer and always be talking to other people in your organization who interact with different areas of the business. One of the key things, in my role, I have the privilege of being able to work with alumni, advancement, admissions, advising,
career.
And it's not something where, it's one of those pieces that's not in your job description necessarily, that you're going to be talking and interacting with these people. But taking the time to go and bring that together and say, what are you hearing? What types of questions are you getting a lot of? And if it's something where if it's a small business and have a lot of other departments, and going and asking the customers that you interact with or the businesses that you're working with, what are you hearing? What are some issues? What are the trends? If you're wanting to build a connection broadly, looking at things like what's happening in the news and building connections with what you're doing and what's happening in the news. Google Trends is a really wonderful tool that shows what people are starting to search for. And being present on social media would be another thing.
Yeah, we've used social media, and I have some background in working with the university's social media channels too. But one of the things that we do regularly is check in with our advisors, who are the first line of contact for all of our students, and find out, what's the chatter, what complaints are there, what frustrations. Sometimes we might go on social media and ask a very pointed question. For instance, our creative writers, we have a page on Facebook called Writing It's New, and might ask the question, what's your biggest frustration as a burgeoning writer about trying to get jobs? And then perhaps with those answers, we might do a webinar And then from that, we'll learn from that, and we'll actually write an article or two about it too. So we always try to be asking a lot of questions. I think one of the things that SNHU prides itself on is doing the best job it can, but never says it's the best. It's always about what can we be doing better, and that's very much what we're about. You know, we're trying to. I always think of it, and when you're in the academic field, for instance, and you are an academic and you're writing a paper or you're writing anything, you're always looking at things based on facts. I always say what we're writing about, well, the academics we work with, but we're trying to tell you about the possibilities. And isn't that what part of getting an education is? You know, you're following a dream, you're trying to figure out what those possibilities are, and by achieving that, you get to go after those possibilities. And that's what, and it sounds very lofty, but that's what we hear all the time from students. I was mentioning to Erin earlier that a couple of years ago I collected 1,800 testimonials from the university, and I've read them all. And the central theme of everything that we've seen is people went back to school because they had something unresolved that they wanted to do in their life. And whether they started traditionally, whether they got to finish, later wanted to go to their master's, there was something in their life they wanted to change. And by telling these stories, we get to offer that possibility. So it's easy to see why we love our job.
I would just round that out by saying that gathering that story and that topic, you can then go back and fill in some of the research afterwards too. So we don't always start with the research. Sometimes we start with a really great idea and then go back and find, well, what are the specific phrases that people are looking for within this topic?
And we do watch all the trends too.
We do, yeah.
And from what I'm seeing that you're showing today and what you're talking about right now, you're from a communication standpoint, you're doing probably the two most important things. You're not selling. You're listening and you're engaging. And that, I think maybe that might even be the answer to some of your question too. Where I think by doing that, instead of trying to push the product or trying to beat people over the head and saying, you know, trumpeting your own success, you're listening to their story and you're engaging with them. You're almost letting them sell themselves.
That's right.
And when we have freelance writers, as I said earlier, we know our brand better than anyone. And if you listen to any admission folks, regardless of where you are within the university, we're never trying to sell anyone to come to SNHU. We want to make sure it's the right fit for them, and if there's another school, then that's where they should be. And we never want any of these articles, when we have freelancers sometimes writing, and they've kind of got the, you should come to SNU. And you're like, no, it's about later on telling them we have a program that might interest them. But it's never about saying this is where you need to be. Because that's for them to decide.
Yeah, it's honest.
Yeah. And it's our DNA. I'm going to chime in only because I told you this morning that tomorrow I'll make a trip to Biddeford, Maine to meet with 3 generations of SNU alumni. So we have the class of 66, which is our first class of 4-year degree recipients that graduated. It's a 50th reunion, and there were only 80-some students in the class. They had no campus. And some of them had come back from serving a few years in the Vietnam War, not a really friendly time to come back from anywhere and figure out how to make your way through life. And New Hampshire College presented them an opportunity to make something of their life, in which they came to us to say, we want to tell our story. We think people need to know what an important presence this college had for us. We've gone on to develop these very successful lives. And one of the gentlemen is not well, and so I'm taking a few of his classmates out to have lunch with him and his family tomorrow. And they also have a niece who's a 94 MBA alumna, and that woman has a daughter who's in her 2nd year at the undergraduate program at the campus. And so just really cool, because there's the very language that they're using is the very language that we put out in our commercials and our students talk about. It's just that we have these different ways in which we can deliver it now and make it accessible to folks. But these are guys that came back and were raising families, were working really hard, didn't have a lot of resources, but have gone on to have their CPA practice or to raise, families, and just really feel a great deal of gratitude. And they're the ones who've come to us with their story to say, we think there should be a WMUR Chronicle story about the role of New Hampshire College in the Manchester community and the mills. Yes, it's pretty, so now to stand here as an alumni director and go, it's so cool to see that our DNA continues, that it's not this thing we've invented, but it's always a part of who we've been. I think it's at
It's very classy.
yeah, absolutely. Is this your phone?
Well, actually, in your publication too, in Paul's letter, he speaks to that, the origin of the school, and it always strikes me that the mission is exactly the same, providing affordable access to higher education in whatever way it works for you, no matter where you are.
So I think for any business, it's to really know what your core is about, know who your audience is, and to make that match as seamless as possible to kind of have that authentic, forward-moving kind of an experience. And so that storytelling is just, we find it when we go out and meet with folks like yourselves, like just listening to, trying to get to know more about you and what your experience looked like in coming through and what, so you can bet that when you get your follow-up email from this event, there'll be like, so tell us, You might have a few questions in there we might want you to answer to be able to share, where it fit for you and what you want us to know about that.
I haven't heard a dull story from an alumni or student yet. Everybody's got a great story.
Everyone has a story.
Are there any other questions?
I had a quick question about the Google keyword search. You must have to start somewhere in order to kind of, how do you start with those, looking for those trending phrases?
That's a really good question. So I like to start, there are a lot of different approaches you can actually take to answer that. And I do a lot of different things when I'm starting to look for that. But one of the things that my preferred way is to know, like, I'm looking for a topic in this general area.
Sure.
So for us, degrees, online degrees, psychology degrees, whatever the type of degree may be. We have lots of different types of degrees, over 200 of them. So I may find, well, I know that I'm interested in something related to this. So I'll take that specific term, kind of a general, broader term, and I'll put it in the Google Keyword Planner, that tool, and say, what are all of the possibilities from this? And it's going to throw out a lot of things. I mean, you're going to have thousands of possibilities that it's going to give you right away. But you can start reading through the first, 10, 15, 100 if you want to. Just kind of go through and say, this makes sense, this doesn't make sense at all. And then just sort of going through and looking for the trends. At that point, you can start to see some trends emerge. And you can pull those together and do another search. And then it's sort of building on itself over time. When you're starting very broadly, and then you get more narrow and more narrow to see how many people. You may find you found an area, a topic area that tons of people are really interested in that you wouldn't have thought about before.
Right.
There's plenty of those opportunities.
And realize it's related to what you do.
Yeah.
And you're like,
That's right. So I like to start there. I also look for, there's a website again, Google Trends, and so you can go and Google Trends, and it will actually show you emerging things that are happening. Or one really neat part is that it tells you even the time of year when there tends to be more interest in that. So if you're trying to get people to purchase something at a store, you'll find that there are times of years when people are really interested in fitness equipment. It happens to be January. No surprise there, but you'll find little pockets of interest.
it's been homecoming speaking of fall.
Homecoming and fall, exactly. So identifying those areas where if you don't already know that, Google Trends can be really helpful for identifying it.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I'm happy to take any other questions later on too.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Awesome. Before we leave, thank you both for being a part of this program. We would love for you all to stay and mingle and network with each other. I did want to give you just a few closing remarks, and that is that our next Business Indicators is going to be August 24th. It's back in Manchester. We're actually unveiling our Sandbox Collaborative. So we're going to be joined by President Paul LeBlanc and Michelle Weiss, who is our director of the Sandbox Collaborative. So we hope that you'll come and play in the sandbox a little bit with us and hear a little bit about the future of SNHU and some of the different opportunities to work in the sandbox and how they may be able to help you solve small and large scale problems within your business.
Can I pipe up?
Yes.
The Sandbox Collaborative is the coolest place you'll ever go to. It is worth the ride.
It is a wild
It
space.
seriously is. You'll
Yeah.
be like, I want to live here.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. And then also we want to invite you all to continue to be involved with SNHU in a way that makes sense for you. One of those ways would be to join our SNU Career Advisory Network. It's an online platform that allows us to kind of self-select for students and mentors to get together, and you can answer questions that students may have in terms of their resume, in terms of informational interviews, in terms of the career path, how you got to where you are. So if you're interested in sharing your experiences as a professional with the current students, we would love to have you join that network and be a part of that. So thank you again, everyone, for joining us, and we hope that you'll continue enjoying the evening. So thank you.